Thanks very much for taking the time to join us here on the presentation today. I will do my very best to respect your time to get through this in the best way we can, and also to be able to provide as much information that's usable for you and your career going forward. So again, your potential advisors earning over $500,000 a year. The question, I think, for so many people in the business, and I've been working with people in financial services for the past 20 years, and the question is, what are they doing that the vast majority of people are not doing? And so this slide really speaks to this, the 2% success solution, that question, what are the 2% doing that the 98% are not? And my answer to you is so much less than what the average person knows it to be. The opportunity for everyone joining us today to join this group, to join that elite group of advisors earning over $500,000 a year, I promise you, it is so much less than what the average person knows it to be. Now, listen, I know that that's a fanciful statement to make, but I'll make you this promise. I will ask you to hold me to account at the end of the presentation today to ask that question, was I honest? Is this something that anyone can do? Is it possible for everyone to be able to join that group? And you will decide the answer to, give you a bit of insight in this. I've never, in a presentation on stage, at conferences, online, I've never had one person say, no, that wasn't true. But again, I will leave that to you, and we'll discuss that towards the end of the presentation. The number one aspect for you and I of everything that we face in life, all of this comes down to behavior. And this is something that has, formed the vast majority of my work and study over the majority of my adult life, which is the study of the science of human behavior, of neuroscience, what goes on in the brain that allows one person to have tremendous success and the next person to live a life of struggle. And again, it really comes down to behavior. And so one of the best tools that I've had in the work that I've done over the past 21 years is the science of human behavior, to be able to go through this with people and show them on a scientific level, again, what is it that allows us to create positive behaviors? And number one, but number two, what is it that drives negative behaviors? And lots of times with people in management, I will hear them make the statement to say, I don't know what's wrong with that person. Folks, if you're in management, let me tell you this right now. There is nothing wrong with the person. If there's something that I'm struggling with right now, I'm not flawed as a human being. The flaw lies in the information that I have taken in over a lifetime of experience, and it's the constant interaction with that information that creates the behavior, good and bad. And so again, regardless of where we are, for the behaviors that are serving us, terrific. We don't have to work on that. But for the behaviors that are holding us back, that's the area that we need to work on. And that is the area 100% that it is possible for anyone to take a negative behavior and turn it into a positive one. When we bring a negative behavior into a situation, how do things generally turn out? Right? Not very well. When we bring a positive behavior into a situation, how do situations normally turn out then? They turn out very well. And so it's the adaptation of behavior that allows people to do absolutely anything. We can learn knowledge, we can learn skills, we can learn all kinds of things, but modifying behavior is absolutely essential. And so, we're going to talk about this throughout the presentation. It really comes in last, in the description, but it really has to begin at the beginning to lay the groundwork to make everything possible. So what is absolutely necessary is to understand how, people end up becoming flawed in their approach. So I would say to you that, my goal is to get in the best physical shape of my life. That's the goal. And then I would say, here's the process and the plan. Then I would go online and I would do some work and I would research and say, I'm going to run around the block every day. I'm going to go to the gym 3 times a week. I'm going to swim in the pool, right? So I define that. But the part that's missing in this is I'm not the person who does that, right? So it is so essential in the beginning to be able to set the mindset that says, first, I am the person who does this. And it is the creation of that mindset before the goal is set and before the activity is defined that then makes it possible. You have to believe through your own personal identification that you are the advisor that is earning in excess of $500,000 a year. The ingraining of that information, the creating of that belief, and the instilling of that behavior then makes everything possible. So for everyone, who has had goals before, who invested in activity before, who gave up before and went back to the old behavior, that is essential. And that's part of it that we will go through and cover. So let's go through this process of human behavior. It begins here with belief, right? Every one of us born with a perfect belief system. Not one of us was ever born with a doubt. And so belief is the key to take action long enough to be able to create a result and eventually to reach our success. And again, every one of us, you, me, everyone included, born with an absolutely perfect belief system. But the events of life that happen over time, we will call them obstacles, begin to create files in the subconscious mind that really begin to challenge us. And so I'll ask you this question right now. Do you face an obstacle? Have you ever faced obstacles? When I'm, presenting live in conferences, I'll ask people this, and all the hands go up, and I'll let them know, as I will you right now. We have a name for you. We call you human, and so these obstacles over time begin to implant the information stored in the subconscious mind, and again, over time, it creates the greatest challenge that you or I or anyone will ever face. And it's this. It's the voice. You hear it. I hear it. We all hear it every day, challenging everything that it is that we're trying to do, counter to negative information that we have taken in to the subconscious mind in the past. I mean, every thought we have and every action we take before we take action, we're not really aware that we're doing it. But in a millisecond, we go inside the files in the subconscious mind, open the files from past experience, and say, what do we know about this? And if the information stored there is of a negative nature, it ends up what? Taking away our choice, talking us out of taking action in something that in the moment made absolutely perfect sense, but we end up getting talked out of it. And so, while the voice is a constant for every one of us, what we're hearing is different for every one of us. What is it the voice is telling you? Right? You can earn this much, but not that. You could be in this shape, but not that shape. You could have this many clients, but not that. I have one client years ago that I was working with, a senior client in private individual coaching with him. He had one client worth $500 million. One client. And I've asked many audiences before, are you comfortable with a client with $1 million, $2 million, $3 million, $5 million? Where's your comfort zone? What about 500 million? And you could just see, the look on people's faces where it's like, oh, that's not part of my belief system. And so the interaction constantly with this voice relative to the information that is stored in the files of the subconscious mind ends up talking us out of taking action and doing the things that we've always been deserving of being. And so this voice over time, once we get into our adult lives, creates something that is a constant for all of us. It creates the screenplay of the motion picture of our lives. Over time, the intake of all of this information begins to define who we believe we are. When we wake up in the morning and our feet hit the floor first thing in the morning, right? And the first thought of our day is, this is who I am, and this is who I'm capable of being. And I go to brush my teeth, and I start thinking, this is probably how the day is going to turn out, because other days turned out like this before, over and over and over again. And so we end up really beginning to believe this screenplay of the motion picture of our lives. We're going to be the lead actor of this motion picture for our entire lives. but we don't have to believe the screenplay that was written by others. Science shows the average adult has about 60,000 thoughts a day. Did you know science has also estimated that the average adult has 90% of the same thoughts you had yesterday? And so this screenplay impacts us day after day after day, but you don't have to believe what is written in there. When I was a kid growing up, the screenplay of my life said that I was not going to amount to much, given that I grew up in poverty and parent alcoholism and lived on the streets alone and homeless at age 14. Grade 10 was as far as I went in high school, so I'm technically overqualified as a consultant. Often laugh with audiences. But in that moment, imagine my belief system, right? I was very much believing that not much was going to turn out very well in my life. And the world was echoing that too. We were not picked as the kids who were the, doctors and lawyers and leaders of industry. We were picked as the kids who might stay out of jail, who might stay off drugs, who, might stay alive. And that was about it. Maybe get a job in manual labor. And sometimes the right people and the right words will come along. And for me, it was the day I left high school, age 16. I had to go down to the office of the school to sign out and sign the papers because I was legally allowed to leave school then. I had to go out and get a job and, feed myself. So I did that, and they made me sit with the guidance counselor, Mr. Gretzinger, before they would dismiss me. And he tried for an hour to talk me out of going, and he wasn't able to. And I was standing up and, walking out of the door, and he stopped me and he said, "Randy, I want you to know something." And I said, "What's that?" He said, "I want you to know this, that where you are now has nothing to do with where you can go." And those words, all those years ago, I truly believe if I was not there that day, if I did not hear those words that day, if he did not say that to me that day, I don't think I would have ended up where I am today. It's, it wasn't one of those magical moments where, the skies parted and the angels sang. It wasn't like that, but I shook his hand. I thanked him very much. He was very nice and very kind. And I left and went and, started my life in manual labor. But for some reason, those words kept coming back. And over the years, I have shared his words with hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people. Basically, what Mr. Gretzinger was saying was, "Look, kid, I'm sorry about yesterday. I can't change that, right? But you can change tomorrow. You're not stuck. Where you are now has nothing to do with where you can go." And again, I truly believe that his words that day started to turn me around and started to make me, question not only what the world around me said, a kid living on the streets and living in poverty and everything else, what's going to turn out for you? It started changing what I told myself. Right. And again, what if he's wrong? And so I pushed back and pushed back, and eventually the jobs got better, and I ended up in sales, worked for a couple of Fortune 500 companies, owned a couple of small businesses at a young age. I owned a swimming pool company and a catering business. It was up in Barrie, and we ended up feeding 500,000 people a year, age 22. And so the more you push back and the more you recognize and realize that the world is lying to you, the more, you just challenge this. And that's what I want you to understand and to apply this to yourself. All the things that you think maybe you can't do, all the things that your family has questioned whether you can do it or not, right? We so need the support of people around us, but you're going to have to just be able to be okay with supporting yourself. Listen, if somebody comes along and says, "You got this, you go get them," then that's a bonus. But don't use that as an excuse to quit if it's not there. Where you are now, I promise you, has nothing to do with where you can go. And those, the things that the world tells you and the thoughts that you have, they're lies. And if you move past it, I promise you can have absolutely anything. So human behavior. And again, this has become, my great mission in life, to be able to understand the human mind and to understand the science of human behavior, of what happens, of how behaviors are created, how choices happen in life, and conversely, how choices are taken away. So we'll start here and say, how are behaviors created? Okay, so we're not aware of it, but every time we have a thought, we intake that information into the files in the subconscious mind, and that information is stored in a tiny cluster of cells in the brain called a neuronet. So all these neurons joining together basically becomes the file system, the storage mechanism for that information. And every time the information is input into the file, then the number of cells in the cluster multiply and the file gets larger. And over time, that file gets larger and larger and larger. For people listening right now, if I said critical illness insurance, or I said disability, or I said, RESPs, you people have enormous files in your brain of information you input again and again and again and again. So again, the more information that's put in the file, the larger the number of cells in the cluster, and the higher it goes in the filing system. And so when we have input information a lot into a specific file, that becomes the top file. And that becomes the file that we access. And when we open that file up based on the information that is in there, that's how we make choices and decisions. So if it's something that, from our past is positive information and we've had positive results, chances are we open the file and the file says, go get them, go do this, go do whatever. But if we access the file and it's negative information, then we're not even aware of it, but we're talking ourselves out of it, right? I reach for the phone to call a new prospect for my business, but the file says, no, Randy, see, that doesn't work out for you. And you're very nervous about that, and you don't like calling strangers. And so why don't you, put the phone down and we'll find some paperwork that we can organize, and that will busy our time. So again, this is how information is created and how the information is stored in the science of the mind. Now, science has proven that over time, the information that is stored in the brain is malleable. And so we're not stuck with this. Pavlov and Pavlov's dogs. Everyone's heard of the experimentation. A Russian scientist, Ivan Pavlov, back in the early 1800s, performed the experiment where he was trying to determine behavior. And so he, with the dogs, he would put the food down and ring a bell, put the food down and ring a bell, put the food down and ring a bell. And pretty soon he wouldn't have to put the food down. He would just ring the bell. And the dogs would salivate. And so everyone's aware of that. And that is the creation of the behavior, because the files in their brain got bigger and bigger and bigger. And just the trigger of that sound caused them to expect food and caused them to salivate. The great news about this is that what a lot of people didn't know and understand is that he carried on his experimentation into something he called the extinction process, where he was able to prove that he could train the dogs to unlearn the behavior. And that is very, very good news for us dogs. So that whatever behaviors you have now that are not serving you, they can change. I have had many clients who, had crushing fear of getting up in front of people in public speaking, now are, doing it every day and just loving it. Others who were terrified to get on an aircraft and now loving flying all over the world. And it's not anything I do. It's the scientific process of reprogramming those files that will allow you to say, oh, there's the telephone. That's a direct line to my bank account. I can't wait to speak to another new prospect. Go. Right. And so you make certain you have a big, long list of people to call. And so the science of this is so important. And this process that science discovered quite a number of years ago, called neuroplasticity, has proven out the point that the information is not fixed, that it is malleable and it's possible to change. And so ultimately what we want to do is that, here is the file that is teaching us something that we don't want to do. And every time we access that file, it says, be afraid to fly, be afraid to speak in front of those people, be afraid to pick up the phone and call those prospects. But what we want to do is replace this file, which is the most dominant, with the file that says, I love to fly. That telephone is a direct line to my bank account. Go. But the process involves, time and the input of information. The science is complicated, but the process is not. So what we want to do is over time begin to allow the synapses and connections for this file to dissipate and slowly go down and go away. And then intentionally in this file, we want to input the correct information again and again and again and again and again until this becomes the dominant file. And when that happens, then we change behavior. And then everything changes. I am looking forward to getting up and speaking in front of people. I'm thrilled to get on the plane to go to my vacation in Aruba. I'm, all of these things, reaching for the phone to call new clients. And so neuroplasticity is a scientific process that says that your brain is malleable and it can change. I have an electron microscope video of actually watching the creation of a thought, which is absolutely fascinating, and watching neurons let go and join together and reform, where we think, the brain is, this organ between your ears and it's static. It's not. The structure of it is changing all the time. One of the great examples is this word. And it was interesting a number of years ago when I was up at the cottage and I was sitting in a little cabin in the woods that I would go out with my coffee and my journal book in the mornings. And it was so nice and quiet, and I would be writing. And I was writing in my journal book one morning, and I happened to look down, and I had written this word. I forget the context of, how it was written, but I looked down at the word impossible. And it really struck me just the effect that word has on me, and the fact that it has on everyone. If you're trying to do something and the world says, or your spouse says, or your colleagues say, that's impossible, right? How does that affect you? In a very negative way. And for the majority of us, it makes us stop. So a great indication of information that's stored in the brain, of all of the examples that you've seen of all the things that are impossible in life. And I sat looking at the word, and I wondered, if I just altered it a little bit, what if I put in a space? What would happen then? This is what happened. Impossible became I'm possible. And then I looked at those two words and I thought, how do those words make me feel? I'm possible, right? I can do this. I was the kid who grew up on the streets with nothing, written off by the world, right? Ended up starting a career in broadcasting at age 28 that took me to the very top in broadcasting in Canada at CFRB 1010 radio in Toronto, and then global television, and then starting a career in personal and professional development in this space, becoming one of the most recognized speakers and behavioral neuroscience trainers in the country, from nothing, from thin air. And the more that we do, and I'm not telling you that to impress you. Honestly, I'm telling you that to impress me. Right? Because going from there to here made this word real, right? It says what? It says, I'm possible. And I want you to ingrain that. I want you to think about this for just a moment. Just close your eyes for 10 seconds and think about that. Everything that you could possibly imagine in life, it's possible. And that makes you possible. And so from here going forward, it's not just about the number of zeros you put in the bank account. Lots of times that's why I get hired to come out and speak at conferences and, coach individuals and the rest of it, right? Can you improve my career and my finance? Of course, right? But that's not all of it. Becoming possible is growing and improving in all areas of life. And that's, so critically important. Here is one of the extraordinary examples of this. Roger Bannister, I think 1954. Before that, in the entire history of the world, it was believed scientifically by everyone that it was physically impossible for anyone to run a mile sub 4 minutes. So they had written it off and said, it is never going to happen. Human beings cannot run a mile in under 4 minutes. Then in 1954, Roger Bannister did it. And you know what's happened since that time? Because what he did is he proved to the world it could be done. He made other people start to believe, right? So what happened? Since he did it and today, there have been about 20,000 other human beings who have run the mile in under 4 minutes, many of them high school students. High school students have broken the 4 minute mile. And so just we need, I get it. As a human being, we need examples to say, this thing that I'm trying to go after, is it possible? And what we're talking about today in joining the very top ranks of financial advisors in this country, the top 0.5%, is it possible to join those ranks? And the answer is yes, of course. It's been done over and over and over again. Why not you? I came across this study in Science a few years ago. It was such a fascinating study. So it was at Harvard Medical School back in the mid 1950s. And for whatever reason, they decided to do this experiment to see how long a rat could last in a beaker of water. Kind of a cruel experiment. It's, waterboarding for rats. So what they did is they filled up these beakers. Then they took the rats and they dropped them in the beaker and they started to swim, and they timed them to see how long the rats could swim. So pretty much across the board, the rats would last about 15 minutes. And then they would start to drown, and they started to go under the water, and they were going to die. So the scientists reached into the beaker, grabbed the rat out, put it on the table, dried it off, waited a couple of moments, and put it back in. I know, horrible, terrible experiment. So the second time that the rats were put into the beaker of water, here's my question to you. How long did they swim the second time? Right? And if I was there in a conference with you live, I'd ask people to, hold up their hands. How many people think they would drown immediately? How many people think 5 minutes? How many people think 10 minutes? How many people think 15 minutes, just like the first time? How many people think 20 minutes? And I would go on a little bit longer and then pause and say, who here believed that the rats would swim for 60 hours? 60 hours. They did. And what was just so absolutely incredible about this study and about these findings is what happened to the rats. Because the first time that they were put in the beaker of water and they were drowning, they gave it everything they had, and they were succumbing and they were drowning at 15 minutes. But then what happened? Right? Then the guy in the white coat grabbed him out and took him out of the water. So what did the rat do then the next time? The rat believed. They believed that they would be saved. And as a result of that, in the waiting to be saved, their endurance went from 15 minutes to 60 hours. Imagine what belief does to your potential, does to your capabilities, does to your success. The more you believe in yourself, I promise you, absolutely, the more you will be able to achieve. And so these words on the screen right now is a process that I worked on for years, which is absolutely necessary to be able to work towards and understand, what's coming out of the files in the subconscious mind, and to be able to deal with that on a conscious level, something called conscious intention. And so conscious intention, what it is to have an intention consciously in the moment. So we begin to work on developing the skill of, as Jim Rohn used to say, wherever you are, be there. Therein lies the magic. And so conscious intention says, I'm picking up the phone right now to call this new prospect. I am going to just call the prospect. I'm fascinated by who this person might be. I'm fascinated by the information I might be able to share. And I'm fascinated by the possibility I might be able to protect their family and help them to grow their retirement and end up having a wonderful life in their later years. I am conscious, and my intention is focused on this exact moment in time. on this phone call. When I'm working on the presentation for that client 2 weeks later, my intention is to create the best presentation I possibly could. And so all of the files in the subconscious mind, and all those little voices that are on your shoulder going, Randy, what about this? What about that happened 10 years ago? Say, no. See, through this process called conscious intention, I recognize that and I bring myself back to the moment. And by allowing ourselves to do that, then we do this. We judge the moment by the moment, and the client by the client, and the economy by the economy, and the day by the day. And we don't get pulled out of it by all of this baggage from all of these past experiences stored in the files of the subconscious mind. So again, another tool in addition to behavioral change, something that we refer to as a reprogramming exercise and a positive change activity list. It's part of what we'll discuss a bit later. But conscious intention allows you to hear those negative voices, feel yourself being pulled out of it and saying, no, stop, right? That thing that happened 6 months ago, that has nothing to do with this client meeting. I am going to go into this completely conscious with the intention of putting on the best presentation and, signing up a brand new client. That is my intention. The other part of what the very top advisors understand and get is something that I created years ago in relation to the mental space that we're able to access on a regular basis, called the 867 factor. So the reality of the 867 factor is this. The average adult, you, I, everyone, we're awake about 17 hours a day. That's about 1,020 minutes. But science has shown that the average adult is only here, focused on this exact moment in time, anywhere from 10 to 15%. So in looking at these statistics, and I love mathematics because it doesn't lie. So what this means is that the average adult is here 15% of the day, not there, thinking about the economy, worried about the client, worried about the weather, thinking about getting the car fixed. I mean, all these things that create absolutely nothing. And that equates to 153 minutes a day. The average adult is here focused on this exact moment in time for about 153 minutes a day. So how much can we accomplish in 153 minutes? And again, it feels like we can have, multiple thoughts going on all the time, but we can't. You can't, as powerful as the brain is, 100 billion brain cells or neurons, more synaptic connections than there are grains of sand on Earth. But you can't have dual thoughts. It feels like we change thoughts in a millisecond, so it feels like we're having multiple thoughts, but you're not. So you cannot think about, that client canceling 2 weeks ago and what is on your desk right now and what it is that you're working on. You can't do that. And so the very top advisors, they have process and solutions and an approach and a discipline and behaviors that take more and more advantage of those 1,020 minutes that we have each and every day. And they are not subject to the 867 factor that the vast majority of the population is either. So looking at this slide now, success and failure. People who know me over all these years know that I believe that the brightest man that our business ever produced was Jim Rohn. He was Anthony Robbins' mentor. He was a farm boy from Nebraska, but had this incredible capacity to take complicated things and make it simple. And of success and failure, he said this. Mr. Rohn said, failure is a few errors in judgment repeated daily. Success is a few disciplines repeated daily, right? There's no big bang theory. I'm not going to succeed today and I'm not going to fail today unless Oprah calls. If Oprah calls, you just buy the cottage. But if Oprah doesn't call, then I need to invest in a reasonable number of disciplines daily. Good example might be, and again, this is a critically important approach that anyone can do, that the top advisors do, and they don't fall down that hole. So if I said to you, I have it on my list of things to do today, that I'm going to call 10 new prospects. A good part of my plan, so that's going to be in my calendar and my schedule. And so I sit down and I start calling these 10 prospects, and I I get about halfway through the calls and then squirrel, right? Something distracts me, and I make 5 calls, not 10. And I'll ask you the question, and I ask this question often in conferences in front of the CEO of the corporation, right? So if one of your people did that, they had 10 calls to make and they got distracted and made 5, not 10. Is their career over? All right. And every one of them, they kind of look disappointed to have to answer the question, but they do. And they say, well, no, they're okay. But see, that's a small error in judgment. And that's what the top producers don't do. And that's what the vast majority of people do, is they allow these small errors in judgment to go on day after day after day after day. And again, hey, it was 5 calls I didn't make today. It's not going to change my life. But see, the challenge is that becomes 5 calls I didn't make every day. That's 25 calls a week. It's 100 calls a month. It's 1,200 calls I didn't make this year, right? Because of a small error in judgment. And the top producers, they don't do that. So I'll ask you this question right now, openly, right? For yourself and, and your God to make the answer. When you make 1,200 calls, going to get some clients, right? You're going to write some business. Are you going to become more successful? 1,200 calls. What's the answer? The answer is, of course, right? But we get faked out because we make the 5 calls and then we make another 5 calls and nothing happens. So we say what? Oh, see, it's not working. And then I stop doing what I knew when that guy in the webinar asked me the question, if I made 1,200 calls, would I be successful? Yes, I would. But I talked myself out of it because of past negative experience. So in business, right, and in life, how many people, answer the question right now that ride this roller coaster, that I'm doing well and I'm not doing well and I'm doing well and I'm not doing well and I'm doing well and I feel like I'm going to be sick, right? And we've all had both times on this roller coaster. I'm sure you've had the times where you're doing really well and you're up at point A and, your business is coming in, referrals are coming in, clients are signing, your kids are brushing their teeth without being asked, right? You're on top of the world. When you're there at point A, how's your mindset? Incredible. But what about when you're at point B? When, people are canceling, the economy is in the tank, you're out of prospects, out of money, mortgage payments coming up, stressed out, and, your confidence is down a little bit lower than the belly of a worm. How does it feel then? So the comparative is to say, when you're at point A, right? This is the example of how powerful the mind is. When you're at point A and things are going so well, and you were to call 20 new prospects, of those 20 people, how many would agree to a meeting or maybe another call or a cup of coffee? And generally, when I'm in live audiences, a lot of people will shout out 20, right? When I'm there, when I'm in that mindset, no one gets away from me. Okay, then what about at point B? What about when you're down there and nothing is working out and you have no prospects and you have no money and you're stressed out and you called the same 20? How many people would say yes? And a lot of people look down at the floor because they've been there and they say, maybe 1, right? Maybe 2, maybe I just can't make calls for a while because my confidence is so low. So in looking at that, you can see the multiple required to reach the exact same outcome, but it's based on mindset, right? 20 out of 20 when you're at point A, 1 out of 20, maybe 2 out of 20 when you're at point B. So the key to this is to be able to get to point A and stay there. Jim Collins, who is one of the great business writers of our time, wrote the book Good to Great about the top CEOs and corporations in this country. His last book that he wrote was called Great by Choice. And his books are a research project that people go out into the field and they research everything they can about this, and then he writes the book about it. So in Great by Choice, they went out and they researched the top producers around the world in a variety of industries. And what they ended up learning about the people who were the consistent perennial winners is something that formed the basis of this book. And Jim Collins typically gives a name to the people that he studies. So the CEOs in Good to Great, he called those people the level 5 leaders. In Great by Choice, the top producers around the world, he called these people the productive paranoids. Not a great name, but indicative of their philosophy of what allowed them to get to the top and stay there. Because here was their mindset. They didn't care. They were consistently focused and or paranoid on tomorrow, next week, next month, next quarter, next year. Where is it? Where is it? Where is it? And as a result of that, they knew that their business activity had to stay consistent and high, not Herculean, but they did not, fall down that hole of saying, well, I'm too busy right now to consistently continue to build my business. And as a result of that, they stayed at the top. And I promise you, it is one of the key elements of top producers in this country. I'll ask you right now, is it possible, right? With the right behavior, is that something you could do? If you had it in your calendar to say, I'm going to call 4 prospects a week, and I'm not making this about cold calling, it's just something we can measure. But whatever the defined activity is, in order to build and maintain a top practice, something like that, to say, could you call 5 people a day? What's the answer? The answer is yes, of course I could do that. But will you? And therein lies, absolute need in this to create the behaviors. So the definition of commitment is something that I wrote a number of years ago, and I think it applies to me. I think it applies to all of us. And here it is. The definition of commitment is the continuation of an activity in the apparent absence of results, right? Because that's where we end up stopping. I did this and I didn't see a result, and then I did it again and I didn't see a result, and I was going to do it again, and I said, you see, it's not working. So I'm not going to the gym. So I'm not calling my clients. So I'm not going to sit and help my kids with their homework, right? It applies in every area of life. And so commitment requires us to invest in the activity regardless of what we see in the moment. I promise you, you can go to the gym today and work out for 4 hours and nothing will look different. But I can guarantee you, biologically, physiologically, you changed. But because we can't see it, right, then we end up falling down that rabbit hole and giving up. And the top producers know, no, see, that's the recipe for failure. Why would I give up when I was right on the door of creating more success? So something that I have talked to audiences about for many years now, based on the content of this slide and what I'm going to talk to you about, it's obvious that I've been talking about this for a while, but it's an example of what are we capable of, right? What am I capable of? What are you capable of as a human being here on this earth with just one life? What are you capable of? And I think it's so important to put all of this into perspective. And so the example that I use, and many years ago, not everyone knew this person, but I would say, who here has heard of Elon Musk? Right? A bunch of hands would go up, not all of them. Now every hand would go up, of course, unless you've been living on a different planet. And I would say, okay, so here is my chance to put this into perspective for you, regardless of whatever you think of him, socially, emotionally, out in public, whatever. Set that aside. I'm talking about actually being able to create something out of thin air from an idea. So here's a guy who moved to Canada from South Africa as a young man with his brother, with no money, lived in a one-room apartment with his brother. His first job was working for Scotiabank. Who hasn't done that, right? And very early on in life, he had this concept and this idea that he wanted to create things that changed the outcome of mankind. At that age, I think I was wondering where I was going to get the 25 cents for a hot dog, but not him. And so his foray into business, his first foray, was to say that he wanted to be able to, trade money and move money around on the internet. And every person on earth said, Mr. Musk, that's not possible. With all the regulations and everything going on in banking today, you can't do that. That's impossible. And he created PayPal. Then he went on next and said, you know, I truly believe that the planet is going to end one day with burning fossil fuels, and we're going to need to combat that and going to need to change that. And so I want to build electric cars. And the entire world said, Mr. Musk, great idea, but that's impossible. It's never going to work. I mean, electric cars are golf carts. Save your money. He had made a lot of money on PayPal and used that to invest that capital into the creation of Tesla. And think about how many times over and over and over in the early days of Tesla for years, the world wrote him off. Sir, it's not possible. It is not possible. And single-handedly today, he may be responsible for saving the earth, right? The major car companies were not running at, making electric cars, but he made it not only viable, but cool and financially capable. Hundreds of billions of dollars now. I mean, a company that's valued now at over $1 trillion. And based on the day's stock price, he is or he is not the wealthiest man in the world. And thousands of times he was told, Mr. Musk, that's not possible. Then he went on to say, we need to become a multiplanetary species. If we don't, one day an asteroid could hit Earth and our species will be wiped out. And so I want to build rockets to one day be able to go to Mars and go to other planets. And he had no experience in the rocket business. When you read his autobiography, his background was that he read comic books about astronauts as a kid. You can't make this up. And so he started SpaceX. And actually, instead of buying rockets from Russia and China and all these places, he built his own. And he built his first rocket, very expensive, and it blew up. And he built another one, and it blew up. And he built another one, and it blew up. And on the cusp of going bankrupt, he was able to scrape together the last dredges of his financial wherewithal, and he built one more. Imagine how many times he was told it was impossible, and he built one more, and it flew. And as a result of the success of that rocket, he landed a contract with NASA for $1.5 billion. And today, SpaceX is the most successful and viable rocket company in the world, and they already have the prototype built for the first manned mission to Mars. And here's my point to you, is that everything that he has done, he was told it's not possible. Every time he went back to the well, he failed, and he kept going. So I guess, we have to look at his example and we have to analyze this and say, so what is he doing? And what I came from his experience and what I distilled it down to is he has something greater than any human being ever on the face of the earth. And it's this. Here's what allows him that level of success. And you can have it too. It's his raging ignorance of doubt. That's it, isn't it? His raging ignorance of doubt. Imagine the more and more and more you're allowed to have the world tell you can't do this, and to have your brain tell you can't do this, and you keep going. So here's my point. The difference between where we are today and what he has accomplished, that chasm, that space in between, that's your potential. It truly is. I promise you. I'm not saying you have to build a rocket company to be successful, but all of those barriers that are put up by the world and by our own subconscious mind, not true. You can break those barriers down. And you can do that. I think back of my own life. There's a picture on the wall over here. 18 years old, I was driving a race car. 16 years old in manual labor. 21 years old, self-employed. 23 years old in sales. 28 years old in broadcasting. 37 years old, ran for federal office. Right? had a career in broadcasting. I mean, all of these things. And honestly, I'm not a very gifted person, but I'm too ignorant to stop myself from doing the things that really matter to me. And I'll tell you right now, this matters to me. To be able to have this ability to speak to you today, this matters to me. To be able to, hold up the mirror and say, come on, right? I absolutely know that you are so much more capable than the mind is allowing you to believe. And so, distilling this down, I have worked with people in finance and insurance for a very long time. I've studied the very, very best, and developed processes for people in your business to reach that level of, the 500,000 plus. So, very quickly, what is required as an advisor to operate at that level is to really, clarify and define your approach. So if I'm a potential client, what are you saying to me that makes me interested in you? Is it some elevator speech that, you've kind of crafted some words together from other people's elevator speeches? Or did you make it about the client? 100% about the client. And the approach that I have developed is called experience first planning. It is absolutely 100% client centric, and it makes all the difference in the world, and it sets you apart from all the other advisors. The next step is, organization. Organization in the self-directed success solution, something that allows you to mimic exactly what it is that top advisors are doing. They sit down every day. They never leave the office. It's like shipbuilders. Shipbuilders will never begin to build a boat until it's finished. And what I mean by that is that they don't begin the process of building the boat until they know exactly every board and every screw and the type of lacquer and the rigging and steering and rudders, everything down to the T. And then they begin to do it. Well, people who are top producers, before they leave the office, in this process that I've developed called the self-directed success solution, they know exactly what they're going to be doing tomorrow. But by calendar hour, the entire day, and everything is costed out in balance, and they follow their activity on a weekly basis, and they're able to track what they're doing in client service and new business development and in compliance and working with their team. All of this is done in a calculated way. So organization is absolutely critical to wake up in the morning and have the entire day planned for you. That's what the top advisors are doing. New business development, it's the same thing. Rather than saying, yeah, I'm going to try and meet as many people as I can, and I'm going to have an approach, and I hope to get some referrals from people and things like that. I'm going to do my best. The very top advisors, they know exactly what their new business development process is, of how they attract clients, what's involved. Is it seminars? Is it referrals? Is it, business seminars? Is it door knocking for businesses? What is it? Social media marketing? And then they break it down mathematically to say, in each of these categories, what would I have to do in order to secure a meeting with one client? And then it becomes math. So then it's the number of activities times the number of clients you want in that particular area, divided by the weeks of the year that you work. And then you get an actual mathematical calculation of what is going to be required. And then you show up at work every day and you execute the plan. But you don't show up and do what the vast majority of people do, which is they sit at their desk and they try and do their best, right? It won't work that way. You have to show up, again, with intention. A+ client service, of being able to have a structured process for all of your very best clients, not only, on typical client service of quarterly meetings and annual meetings and balancing the portfolio and the rest of it, but really drilling down. If you really want to, have extraordinary clients and tremendous referrals, drilling down on an emotional level and connecting with clients that way through emotional connections and client contact, keeping a dossier on every file, and really being able to deliver and do things that the vast majority of advisors, they don't do. And finally, with COIs, 74% of all high net worth referrals don't come from colleagues and family and friends. They come from centers of influence. And so creating a very robust, not a casual, occasional, but a very robust COI group, carrying that into a mastermind group, and then developing a platinum referral process, which gives you 3 different options of how to approach clients for referrals. And, on referrals, I'm very old school. I think that it has to begin with earning them. So the final skill in this, for the advisors, again, all of the process is not that difficult to teach, but this is the key, right? When you learn what the advisors do, then it's going to take the creation of the behavior, and of your own, we talked about this earlier, of your own personal identification, that you see yourself, that you believe in yourself, that you are that person who is deserving of those results. Until there is a connection between your belief and the activity and the goals, in most times it just doesn't happen. And so the behavior is an absolutely critical part of it. So I'll bring you back to the beginning. I asked you the question, and I posed that statement that, what are the top 2%? In this case, the top 0.5%. For debate always, right? This is my position on it. I haven't had anyone say it won't work, but I am open to your input. So question number 1, the things that the very top advisors are doing, are they secrets? Is it something that they're doing and no one else knows what they're doing? What's the answer? The answer is no, of course not. You can learn what it is that they're doing. And I, many times are presenting at conferences and the top advisors are there, and I'll point them out and ask them, so what you're doing, is it a secret? Nope. Okay, so is it possible to learn what they're doing? The answer is yes. Next, is it possible to create a similar plan? What's the answer? You could go and, sit down with a top advisor and buy them lunch and say, here's my structure and here's my plan. What do you think? What would I have to change, do, and improve to make it better? Is it possible to create a similar plan, to be able to be so planned every night that you wake up in the morning and the entire day is planned out by calendar hour in detail? Is it possible to create that plan? What's the answer? The answer is yes. And then finally, if you create the same behaviors that they have, and here's the magic of top producers, right? It is not that complicated. They create an excellent plan. They are scheduled and planned every day. They wake up and execute every day. And you know what else they do? They have a bad day. They might have a bad week. And you know what happens? Nothing. The very top producers know, right, that it's the economy of scale. In continuing to do the right things, the results are going to be there. There's going to be ebbs and flows with the clients, with the markets, with everything else, but they don't change their plan. And ultimately, when you become a top producer, you're going to recognize that finally you're at a place where it doesn't matter if you have a bad day or a bad week. You continue to do what is necessary to achieve it. So my question to you is, if you check these boxes and you begin to do what they do, will you begin to get what they get? And my question at the beginning of this with you was that. Was I honest with you? Is this something that is less than most people know it to be? Is it nothing? Of course not. Right? Is it work? Of course. Are you going to have to work to change behaviors and overcome, right, those past files of, negative information in the subconscious mind? Of course. Yes, you will. But is this something that is right there for you? And the answer is yes, it is. So when I began in this business 21 years ago, I started as a speaker and I wrote books. I had come from a career in broadcasting and I was recognized, so I was doing pretty well. But I started to notice, that this doesn't change people's lives. Giving keynote presentations, it might start the thought process, but it doesn't allow them to really begin to implement what is necessary. And I created this slogan that's on the screen here right now: the difference between wanting and having is doing. And so this program, Elevate, was designed for advisors to help them systematically, in a structured way, with accountability, to actually implement long enough what is necessary in order to achieve those levels. And so the program is over 12 months, 12 modules throughout this, one module per month. In the first half of the course, the modules are on productivity, that self-directed success solution, new business development, and the approach of experience first planning, changing behaviors, which is just absolutely everything. Defining what your emotional drive is, to know that the emotions and your identity is aligned with what it is that you want, grow, and you improve your level of focus. And then relationships and becoming that person that is so connected to other people is a skill that can be learned. Some people think, well, that person is just charismatic. No, they're just doing the right things that touch people on an emotional level and make them attractive to other people. The second half of the program is on senior practice management, the approach to business, experience first planning, A+ client service and client segmentation, to be able to make your best clients the ones that you get referrals from, which are the ones you want referrals from, and to make them raving fans. A new business development model broken down to the mathematics of what is necessary on an annual basis, and then extrapolated down onto a weekly and a daily basis in order to hit your targets. The platinum referral process, and then a very special session on COIs, centers of influence, and creating your own mastermind group. So this program, Elevate, has been around for 15 years. I created another program called The Winner Within almost 20 years ago, and many of the core elements of that program are in this. So the investment for 12 months of training, including an additional 6 months of follow-up and accountability. So the training sessions are delivered once a month. Then I contact my clients. I'm probably the only training company that I know of that does this. I contact my clients every day with a daily reminder of what was to be done based on, relative to where they are on the program, and then a tool of accountability very quickly to be able to respond back to say, did you do it? Did you do it? Did you do it? Did you do it? And it becomes Pavlovian. And without it, it just becomes that much harder to create the behaviors. And that's what is instilled in it as well. And then on top of it, in addition to that, everyone has access to myself at any time for clarification and questions and one-on-one assistance. So the investment in this is $1,995. I decided, in working with Alan today with CE Credits Canada, and you'll be receiving a CE credit for this program today, to just do this for this presentation, to reduce the cost of the program by $1,756. So for $239, those aren't payments. That's the entire program. The discount code is the word Elevate 321. Kind of go, right? So the discount code again to get this program for $239 is Elevate 321.
So we did get some commentary from the chat room, and so I do want to talk to you about that and ask you those questions. But I want to start off with something that you said in the presentation, which is a quote from your guidance counselor, that where you are today has nothing to do with where you can go. I'm sorry about yesterday, but you can change your tomorrow. What a powerful statement.
I've thought about it 10,000 times. He's been gone for a number of years. And it was really interesting too, because, in going through this, I think somehow he kind of followed my career. I left with a grade 10 education. It was halfway through a grade 11 when I left, and I got a call from him a number of years later when I was working, and I think it was in broadcasting at the time, and they had started a wall of fame and the plaque is right over there on the wall. I don't know if you can see it or not, but they started a wall of fame at my high school, and he called me wanting to um, put me and include me in the first year of the Wall of Fame.
Wow.
And wow, because I have a grade 10 education, and I've had to struggle with that my whole life. That there's lots of times I'm coaching and speaking to CEOs and incredibly bright and educated people. So I've thought 1,000 times about those words that he said, and wondered if he had not said it that day, right? And he didn't give me that to hang on to, because I believed, like the world believed, not much was possible. And so it became, kind of the mainstay of pretty much every presentation that I've ever given. Large conferences, meetings, sales meetings, to tell people, look, right, just like Mr. Gretzinger said, you're not stuck. You don't have to stay here. You can't change yesterday, but you can certainly change tomorrow. And that became, the kind of the driving force, and allowed me to go from where I was to where I am. Still today, I pull in my own driveway sometimes and look around to see if the police are following me in, right? To say, what are you doing here? So, for everyone listening, it is my greatest goal in life to have people start to believe in themselves more. Not entirely. You don't have to sit here right now and say, okay, yeah, thanks, it was a great presentation, now I believe in me. No, it's going to be a process, right? But in knowing that you can do that you can move forward, right? Roger Bannister broke the 4-minute mile, 1954 or 55. Up until that time, humankind said it was absolutely impossible to run the 4-minute mile. And since that time, 20,000 people have done it, including high school students. So it is a graduated process, but where you are now, it really has nothing to do with where you can go. And, you want to join this top 2%, you want to, change your community, you want to change your health, you want to change your relationships, all of it is entirely possible. So.
Absolutely. And that actually leads perfectly into the first question comment that we got from the chat room, which was from Mazen Al Tahir. And made the comment, we easily get discouraged.
Yeah, and there's a very good reason for that, right? Because you have, this hurricane of information in your head based on all of the past negative experiences that we've had. And the interesting part about negative information is that it doesn't have to be happening repetitively for it to become stronger. And the reality is, fear of flying is one of the great examples. So I could have a bumpy flight, I watch a scary movie, I have this terrible turbulence or something, on the plane. And then that was one experience, right? But then over and over and over again, I keep telling myself, I should be afraid of this. The plane's going to crash. The plane's going to crash. Even though I know, statistically, it is by far the safest form of travel in the world. But that repetitive self-talk is what makes the file bigger and bigger and bigger when children are bullied, and the information that is seared into their brain that you're stupid and lazy and you're never going to amount to anything. And then that was said to them once, right, by other kids, by their parents in a fit of anger or whatever, but then they repeat that phrase in their own brain again and again and again, and pretty soon, just like flying, they convince themselves of a lie. And so that's why it's difficult, but it's not impossible. And therein lies, I think, the beauty of the process. If you keep going, whatever challenges you've had in the past, I promise you, you can overcome them. You absolutely can. And it is the consistent, pushing of the envelope. It's like going into the gym. I can't go into the gym if I haven't been there for 10 years and lift 50-pound, dumbbells and do bicep curls. I can't do it. It's physically impossible. Can I lift 20s? Sure. Can I go back the next day and lift 50s? No. Right? But if I lift the 20s 2 or 3 times a week for a couple of weeks, I can go to 25. Do that again, go to 30, go to 35, go to 40, go to 45, go to 50. So what do we learn? Right? I can lift 50 pounds, but just not today.
Right.
And our belief system is very much the same.
Absolutely. That actually leads into Leo Chaco's question. Leo says, "What is the way to overcome imposter syndrome?"
Yeah, well, welcome to the world. And again, this is this is the conditioning that ends up happening over a lifetime. When I started in broadcasting, it is ripe with everyone in the broadcasting industry. Whatever profession you go into, there's going to be a time where you feel like, well, I guess I must be kidding the world somehow, and so far I've gotten away with it because we are going against that constant barrage in our brain of all the challenges in the business, of all the reasons why, of all the reports that we see of other people beginning to succeed and move forward. One of the most horrible things in life is social media, right? The internet.
Yes.
Women look at thousands and thousands of absolutely unrealistic images of other women and girls, and so why do you think that that happens? Because this comparative against something that is not real becomes becomes the benchmark. And so when we do that, then obviously those thoughts are going to come about, but it's the constant moving forward, 1 foot, then 1 foot. The great quote by Lao Tzu that said the journey of 1,000 miles begins with the first step. True. What he didn't
Absolutely.
say is you have to keep walking, right? So it's the walking that will change anything. It will.
Absolutely. Who would have thought a one-legged man can run halfway across the country?
I was there in Barrie, Ontario, and I met him and ran with him up Kempenfelt Bay. We were
Wow.
part of a charity, not a charity group, but I guess the Barrie JCs, and put on a big event for him. And we were there, the greeting party, and wow, when you talk about what's possible, just
Yes.
incredible fortitude, amazing.
Oh, absolutely. And as you said, impossible, when you break the word down, is I am possible. I
I'm
am
possible.
possible.
Yes, I am.
Very, very powerful. We actually have two quotes here, two posts here from Antoine. The first is that he put in here was, "Success is going from failure to failure without losing your enthusiasm." It's a quote from Winston Churchill. And then the second one he just posted was, "You will never do anything great if you're afraid of being ridiculous."
Yeah, absolutely right. I mean, the one thing I think, to bring everything together of what we're talking about in this, isn't it interesting, right? That people are drawn in by, okay, so the people that are making $500,000 a year, wow, that's